So I'm just thinking out loud, obviously. Let's get to it. Day 48 of 100. It's not really 100 days at this point. I've skipped like 9 or 10 days. I was doing one post one day. Life happens. It is what it is. I had a good run. I'm still going to finish out. I'm still going to keep going. But I couldn't do 100 days in a row. It is what it is, right? But day 48 of 100 days. Welcome to CNN. I'll be your host, Kirk Kennedy. Let's go in. All right, so I want to, I don't know if you do this a lot, but I have been lately, the last probably 2 months or so, I've watched a lot of these testimonies, like I went to hell and I saw, and they explained what they saw in hell, or uh, one guy, I remember watching one of them, a guy was at Judgment Day and thinking about that. And then I watched one today where a pastor was from out in Africa somewhere. I want to say wasn't Nigeria. It wasn't Congo. I can't remember where, but he was talking about what they were doing in the ministry, and then he had this encounter with the Lord, and the Lord was basically exposing some sin in his heart, and it was pretty serious. And when these people share these stories, there are two things that I think about when I watch these videos of someone sharing their testimony. They saw hell, whatever. There's two, maybe three things that I think about. The first is, I don't think these are from the devil, because the last thing that Satan wants is for people to watch a video of someone describing the horrors of hell in order for them to get their lives together, turn and repent if you're not a Christian, or firm up your obedience as a Christian, right? I don't think the devil is behind that. Okay. So I definitely think like, oh, these people, it's from the Lord, or at least these people are encouraged to, like, no one who has those kind of visions comes back and is like, yeah, so after having seen that, man, I think y'all should go out and party and do. No one's thinking that, right? Like, everyone is terrified when they come back from that kind of vision. And and so I think, okay, I think that's not from the enemy. The second thing I think is, I don't get my theology from these things, right? Like I think the people who are having these visions, I think they're genuinely seeing what they think, and they're describing their experience and what they had. But I don't get my theology from these things, right? I don't look at these things and think, "Oh, okay, this is what I'm basing my how I'm going to view standing in front of the Lord on what this person is saying." I don't get my theology from them, but I do usually take them and think, "Hey, this is a helpful warning for me to just be sober minded." Because, in all honesty, if we're honest, many believers, including you watching and myself, we have this vision of what we think standing before the Lord is going to be like. And I don't think any of us, just like no one fantasizes about being in second or third place, you always imagine you're in first place and you're killing it. No one really fantasizes or imagines standing in front of the Lord and him being like upset. You usually imagine the Lord being like, well done, and glad it's very rare that people are like trying to imagine or encouraged by that scene. So I don't get my theology from these things, but I do think that the Lord, I think there's something to be learned from these kind of visions. And the third thing I would say is, and I had this thought today as I watched one, that there seems to be a consistent tone in each of these visions that these people have when the Lord is actually talking. And the thing I was telling a buddy of mine earlier today, the thing that I feel like is most consistent about these things, besides the terror that the person is experiencing standing before the living God, right? But the other thing is, like, the Lord is a bit more firmer than, like, I think many of us think that he's going to be. I think there's this, when the Lord is questioning the people who have these visions and pointing out areas in their lives where they disobeyed him, there's almost this sense where the Lord is angry at the person, and that person is terrified, and the Lord is really, it's almost like an admonishment, a rebuke, right? And it made me think about, how do I process grace? How do you process grace? And when we do stop and think about the day of the Lord or what that's going to be like, what do we actually think? And I had this thought from Revelation 1, which I felt like makes me think that what these visions that these people are having, that it may be more accurate on one level. And I don't know how much you think about, okay, when I'm standing before the Lord and giving an account, what you think that's going to be like. But I think without thinking about it, I think some of us probably think it's just going to be a little bit more smoother and more put together than we thought. And so I wanted to read this passage from Revelation 1 has always kind of sobered me a little bit. And I want to read just a couple of verses of Revelation 1. So Revelation 1 is the Apostle John. Now remember, John in his gospel refers to himself on at least 3 or 4 occasions as the apostle whom Jesus loved, right? So I don't know why John gives himself that designation, but he says he's the apostle that Jesus loved, all right? And so this is the same John that's saying that about himself is writing Revelation. And in Revelation 1, he's describing the visions that he's seeing and the words that he's hearing. He's hearing the Lord speaking to him. Remember, this is a disciple whom Jesus loved. And then this is how he describes the Lord. And walk with me through this. This is what he says. Then I turned to see the voice that was speaking to me. And on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands. And in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest. The hairs of his head were white, like wool, like snow. His eyes were like a flame of fire. His feet were like burnished bronze, refined in a furnace, and his voice was like the roar of many waters. In his right hand, he held 7 stars. From his mouth came a sharp 2-edged sword, and his face was like the shining sun in full strength. When I saw him, I fell as though dead. I fell at his feet as though dead. But he laid his right hand on me, saying, "Fear not, I am the first and the last." Here's the thing that strikes me. Now, one, people use this particular scene to say that Jesus was not white. He was melanin and he looked black. He had brown. This is not, while I agree that Jesus wasn't the picture that we see of him, that's a European Jesus that was painted, a millennia later from the gospel. This description of Jesus is in heavenly form, not what he looked like in human form. But the thing that stands out to me the most when I see this scene is this verse. Is John. Remember who John is. He is the disciple whom Jesus loved. And look at his response. When I saw him, I fell at his feet as though dead. Now, this is John who actually went 3 years on earth being discipled by Jesus. This is the same John who said he's the disciple that Jesus loved. This is the same John who is the only apostle. I'm making the distinction between apostle and disciple. The only apostle of the 12 who was at the crucifixion. He was the only guy there. It was Mary, Jesus's mom, Mary Magdalene, and I think another woman was there as well. I think the mother of James and Joseph. Like, he was the only guy there. That John who watched Jesus take his last breath. That same John, it saw Jesus in the eternal glory, in the eternal realm, and he fell as though dead. He could not stand and look at his friend, the one whom loves him, without losing his mind, like losing everything. Like, he fell dead, and then the Lord had to basically help him up. And it made me just wonder, like, how do we think about grace and standing before the Lord and so forth? And I just wanted to say, without taking too much more time, if you ever watch any of these videos, don't get your theology, your end times theology or standing before the Lord. But I think there's one thing that the pastor said today that I personally think I know can be missing in my life. Not like it's not there, but it's kind of in the middle ground instead of the foreground sometimes. And when I heard him talk, and I think about how John was terrified to see Jesus, I don't think when we stand before the Lord, it's going to be as comfortable as I think we might think it might be. If we even think about it, I don't think it's going to be that comfortable. It's not going to be, I don't think it's going to be all the good things that you did and not any of the things that you should have done differently. I don't think it's going to be like that. And I've been meditating on this verse a little bit today that I think is a verse that if I get nothing else from any of these, I went to hell or I was at judgment day, here's the verse that I get that I can tend to not think about this verse a lot. And I wonder if you don't as well. Here's the verse, Hebrews 12:14. It says this: strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord. You think about this verse for a second. It says, strive for peace with everyone and the holiness without which. So it connects striving for peace with people and being holy. And it says, without which no one will see the Lord. You know, I don't know what denomination you're in or how your Christianity works, but the actual word holiness lately in this genre of Christianity, I don't hear that word that much. When I came into the faith in like late 99, like 99 and early 2000s, there was sort of at least in the circle that I ran in, there was a holiness, like the language was used, a pursuit of that. We were even reading books by the Puritans, who I think just went a little way too far. But there was a sense where, reading J.C. Ryle Holiness, there was a sense where, wow, this is a real thing. And I've noticed over the last, 15 years or so, 16, maybe longer, 18 years, I've noticed a sharp decline in this reality, right? Strive for and home without which no one will see the Lord. And I just wonder how many people who profess to believe who really are really just kind of lackadaisical and not really taking holiness seriously are going to find themselves really terrified when they stand before the Lord. And so again, I this verse says what it says. You will not see the Lord unless you are holy. And you're not just holy. It didn't say strive for peace with everyone and the holiness, meaning just, the imputed righteousness you get from Christ. I don't think that's what it's saying, because it's talking to believers. So the Bible is not a book written to unbelievers. So it's not communicating, if you have the imputed righteousness of Christ, and it's talking about the actual lifestyle, the way that we think, act, and live. And you connect it to strive for peace. And it just makes me wonder if John, the Apostle John, if he, the disciple whom Jesus loved, stood before Jesus, and when he saw him in that glory, he couldn't even handle it. He dropped as though dead. What does that mean for me and you? What are we going to do when we stand before the Lord and see him as he really is, and not in the stories that we think, and not in our imaginations, but there? And I wonder how much that reality should encourage us to strive for peace with everyone and the holiness, because if we're not holy, we won't see the Lord. So I just been a little bit meditating on this today. Thought I'd share this. If it doesn't bother you, if it's not something you, keep it moving. If it does, let's persevere in it. Let's think about, what does that look like for me? And I wonder how much of what even Christian creatives, even me, even all the stuff that we're so worried about that's happening in the world, I wonder how much of the things that we watch or that we're worried about, or that even Christian creatives focus on, I mean, how much of that stuff is really helping us be holy, and how much of it is just distracting us from other things that we could be doing to cultivate that? So what do I know? I'm sitting here just convicted myself and processing this reality, and inviting you to do the same. You're going to drop dead when you see him. I'm going to drop dead. I just don't think it's going to be as comfortable as we think. But again, what do I know? What do I know? I'm about to eat some fish for crying out loud. All right, y'all. Appreciate you. I'll be back tomorrow with another one. Apologize for missing some of the days I missed, but life happens. Y'all not paying me to do this anyway. Grace and peace, y'all. See you soon.